Hello, my dear friends and viewers, and welcome to my first live stream of the history of ex-Yugoslavia, the Balkans, and Serbia. So today in this live stream, I'm going to talk about uh, the why did Yugoslavia collapse and some of the reasons why Yugoslavia came down and the life after Yugoslavia came down. So that's what I'll talk about today. If you have any questions, you could write it down in the comments down below or in the top chat box. So without further ado, we're going to talk about the Yugoslavia, why it collapsed, and the reasons for it, and the life after the collapse of communism in Yugoslavia. So if you don't know what Yugoslavia is, for our audience who doesn't know what Yugoslavia is, it was a former country in Europe that consisted of 8 republics. That was Serbia, Croatia, Slovenia, Bosnia, Montenegro, Kosovo, Montenegro, and Macedonia. And that's what Yugoslavia consisted of. It started off first as a kingdom, and then after World War II, when the communists took over, it became a communist capitalist nation, Yugoslavia. So very much different compared to the Soviet Union. It was much more freedom. There was elections in Yugoslavia. People had more opportunities to go travel abroad and overseas to Western European countries and to the United States rather than the Eastern European countries. And so when Tito died in 1980, Tito's death marked the one of the causes that Yugoslavia collapsed, and Tito's funeral was the largest funeral in world history at that period. And then, like a lot of the political leaders throughout the world, like the Chinese officials, the East German, West German officials, Bulgarian officials, the Soviet officials, had appeared at Tito's funeral in Belgrade. And he died actually in Slovenia, Ljubljana, the capital of Slovenia. At that time, it was the Slovenian Republic of Yugoslavia, one of the 8 republics of Yugoslavia. And so when he died, that was one of the causes of the collapse of Yugoslavia. Now, number two, one of the second reason why Yugoslavia came down was because of economic problems, and also the inflation started to take place, and also uh, unemployment rates started to hit, and so a lot of people were losing their jobs and stuff. So it was very difficult time. And then also there was a lot of and then reason number three is entirely because there was ethnic tensions in ex-Yugoslavia between uh, the Serbs, Kosovo Serbs, and Kosovo Albanians who were living in Kosovo. And then there was tensions over there, and because they were saying that Albanians live in Kosovo, but at the time, Kosovo belonged under the control of Yugoslavia. That was one of the republics of Yugoslavia at the time. And so, and then later on, when Milosevic would take power, or when he became the general secretary or one of the leaders of the Communist Party of Yugoslav Serbia in 1897, he started to organize revolutions in the former Yugoslavia, and then that would take out his enemies basically and replace them with some of his supporters. And this was also known as the anti-bureaucratic revolutions in Yugoslavia. Milosevic would kick out the people in power in various parts of Yugoslavia, like Serbia, Kosovo, and Montenegro, and he would replace those with his allies in those areas that were part of the former Yugoslavia. And so at that moment, um, when Yugoslavia was coming down or was collapsing, all other Eastern Bloc countries that were formerly Soviet satellite states would come down, like Bulgaria, Romania, Albania, Poland, East Germany, Hungary, and Soviet Union would come down. And then there would also be a period known as the revolutions of 1898, 9. That was when anti-communist revolution started to take place, and like the fall of the Berlin Wall started to come down, and then there would be a change of government, a violent revolution in Romania with the removal and killing of Romanian communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu when he attempted to flee the country with his wife, and he was shot and killed together with his wife on live television. And so, yeah, Gorbachev, during the Gorbachev era in 1985, relationships between Yugoslavia and Soviet Union began to relax and everything, and Gorbachev was having relationships with the Yugoslavia. And at that time, Gorbachev took power in Soviet Union in 1985. That was when he took power following the death of Konstantin Chernenko. And so, and then also there was a time in the early 80s, right after the death of Tito. It was in 1981. There was protests in Kosovo, a student protest in Kosovo that was demanding Kosovo Serbs were demanding Kosovo Albanians to leave that area because they were saying that Kosovo belongs to Serbia, and so and then also the presidency of Yugoslavia declared a state of emergency because there was protests were going on over there, and then those protests in Kosovo would soon be crushed and suppressed by the Yugoslav police force there, and that revolt would come to an end. And so, yeah, those are some of the reasons why Yugoslavia, one of the three main reasons why Yugoslavia collapsed in the aftermath of the Cold War. Reasons because of economic problems, inflation and unemployment rates increased, and there were ethnic tensions in the Yugoslavia between Serbs and Albanians in Kosovo. And that would ultimately lead to the Kosovo Wars in late 1990s. And I think I'll talk about that in one of my future episodes, or maybe one of my live streams. So, yeah. And then also Milosevic at that time would give a speech in Kosovo on the 600th anniversary of the Battle of Kosovo. That was when a Serbian army was defeated by the Ottomans in Kosovo. And that was on June 28th, 1398. And Milosevic gave that speech in Kosovo on June 28th, 1989, the same year when all communist countries in Eastern Europe were starting to dissolve, and that was when democracy would soon take over in those countries, basically. And so, at that moment, Yugoslavia would later come down or would later dissolve in 1992. Communism in Yugoslavia would come down. And this was a year right after Soviet Union dissolved, and that was when Boris Yeltsin was elected as the president of the first president of Russia, of democratic Russia. And so the difference between the collapse of Soviet Union and Yugoslavia was much different. And the reason why I say it was much different was because that there were no civil wars in Soviet Union after the collapse of the USSR, because Gorbachev had peacefully dissolved Soviet Union. On the other hand, Mihailovic and Yugoslavia did not dissolve Yugoslavia peacefully, because he started the civil wars in ex-Yugoslavia, particularly in Kosovo, Bosnia, and and Croatia. And so there was also a very famous saying in Serbia that Milosevic was a traitor. In Serbian language. It would be Slobodan Milosevic je izgledajnik do srpskog naroda, which translates to Milosevic was a traitor to the Serbian people. And so, and then also at the time, there was and some of the Yugoslav republics started to declare their independence. For example, like Croatia and Slovenia would declare their independence because they did not want to be a part of Yugoslavia anymore. And so, yeah, and then Yugoslavia, on the other hand, did not want Slovenia to leave, to declare their independence, because there was a referendum that was held in Slovenia. It was, at that time, the president of Slovenia was Milan Kučan. He was the president of Slovenia when Yugoslavia declared their independence. And so he would declare independence for Slovenia. And then on the other hand, Milosevic did not like that idea. And so he had invaded Yugoslav Slovenia. I call that because, like, the Soviet republics were called like Soviet Russia, Soviet Armenia, and then I just decided to call it Yugoslav Slovenia at the time. And so, and then also when the war in Slovenia broke out, it was called the 10-day war, because it did not last for a long period of time. And so, yeah, at the time when all the wars in Yugoslavia, civil wars in Yugoslavia were taking place, the president of the United States was, at the time, it was George H.W., the son of he was the father of George W. Bush, who would soon take office as president of the United States in 2001, and he would be the president of when the September 11th attacks would take place. But I'm getting a little bit off topic. But anyway, the Yugoslav and then Slovenia would declare their independence, and they would soon be attacked by the Yugoslav Royal Army, which at that time was which was the Serbian army at the time, and they would soon attack them, and then an agreement was signed, and that ultimately ended the war in Slovenia, and then Slovenia was left alone. But on the other hand, it was a very different scenario for Croatia, because at the time, the Croatian president Tuđman, Franco Tuđman, he was the president of Croatia, and there was a lot of tensions between Croatian Serbs and Serbs, because like they were saying that Croatian government may commit genocide in the same scenario as against the Serbs, that the Croatian government may commit genocide against Croatian Serbs, and that may be the same scenario as when the Croatian fascists under the Ante Pavelić would commit genocide against the Serbs, Gypsies, and Jews, as Ante Pavelić had. That's what the Serbs' biggest fear was, what the Croatian people would do to the Serb-Croatian people again, as they had in the past. And so, as I said, Yugoslav wars would break out in 1991, when some of the Yugoslav republics started to declare their independence. And at the time, also another Yugoslav republic would declare their independence. This time it was Bosnia and Herzegovina. Bosnia would declare their independence, would hold an referendum, and they would soon, some of members of the Bosnian parliament, or that was former Yugoslavia, would declare their independence from Yugoslavia, and they basically also opened up a new federation in Bosnia. It's called the Republika Srpska, also known as the Serbian Republic of Bosnia. So that was basically some minorities of Bosnia. That's where some Bosnian Serbs had settled in, or some Serbs lived in Bosnia. So that was formed on January 9th, 1992, when the Bosnian Serb Assembly had established the Republika Srpska. And there's also two versions of how the war in Bosnia started. There was one official version was where there was a shooting at a Bosnian wedding in Sarajevo. This was in March 1992, and that was when a Serbian shot someone at a Bosnian wedding in Sarajevo. And then also the second official version is when Bosnia declared their independence in a referendum, and that's the two of the reasons why Bosnia had declared the independence. That's how Bosnian War started. And so Bosnian War would start in April 1992. That was when Serbia attacked Bosnia, and that's how the war started in Bosnia. And then also there was a lot of major generals. There was Radovan Karadzic. He was the former president of the Republika Srpska, and Radovan Karadzic was from Montenegro. In Serbian language, it would be pronounced as Crna Gora, and that would also translate to the Black Mountains. Black Mountain. That's what Montenegro's name means. And then there was Ratko Mladic, who was a Serbian Bosnian Serb general who served in the Yugoslav army, and he would also be responsible for the massacres in Srebrenica in July 1995, and he would also be put on trial for his crimes he had committed in Yugoslavia during the civil wars there. And so Radovan Karadzic, he was a doctor, I believe. He was in Serbian language, he was called psihiatra, which translates to a physician or something. So that's and he was also a poet, basically, Radovan Karadzic. And as of now, he's serving a life imprisonment for the crimes committed in Bosnia. Same with Radovan Karadzic. He was placed on trial, and he would be given the life penalty. Radovan Karadzic was captured in 2008, while Ratko Mladic was captured in Serbia in 2011. So, yeah. And there was a huge hunt for those men who were for those generals. They were trying to capture them multiple times. And so Radovan Karadzic's father was a Chetniks fighter, so that was basically like a resistance movement in Yugoslavia during World War II when they were fighting the German occupation. And then Radovan Karadzic's father would ultimately be imprisoned for his activities he took part in Draza Mihailovic's Chetnik resistance organization by the communist authorities under Tito. And so, Milosevic's childhood was very difficult, and the reason why I say that is because Milosevic had a difficult childhood because both his parents had committed suicide for some unknown reasons, and so Milosevic was born in Belgrade, Oh no, not Belgrade. Sorry, it's somewhere in Serbia. Porezovic, and so that was this city in Serbia. But at the time, Milosevic was born in Serbia. But at that time, Serbia was under the Nazi occupation at the time, and so his father had spoken both Serbian and Russian. So he spoke that. He spoke those two languages. And so, just like me, I could understand a little bit of. I speak fluent English because that's my first language because I was born in America. And then, since I have a huge passion for Serbia and the Balkans, I could speak a little bit of Serbian. I could speak a little of Russian, Armenian, and Bulgarian. And so, in the future, I also plan to learn German, Spanish, and possibly Romanian. So I'll be like a multilingual speaker. But anyway, that's a subject for next time. So Milosevic, Milosevic did not dissolve Yugoslavia very peacefully as Gorbachev did, and some Serbian people had viewed Milosevic as the Gorbachev of the Soviet Union, and so. And then that was not true because he had caused the country into a civil war between, and it's also a very complicated war because there was a lot of Serbs that were killing Bosnians, and there was Croatians that were killing Serbs, and there was everybody was killing everybody, and so other Western countries like Germany and France and Britain and the United States had recognized some of the independent ex-Yugoslav republics like Slovenia, Croatia, and Macedonia. And Macedonia was the only, country that did not go to war and had lived a peaceful time rather than fighting a war with ex-Yugoslavia. And that was the only Yugoslav republic that did not fight against Serbia. But at the time, all Yugoslav republics had declared their independence, like Slovenia, Croatia, Bosnia, Kosovo, and Macedonia, but no Serbia. No Serbia or Montenegro, because Serbia came up with the idea of Yugoslavia, and they did not want to leave Yugoslavia basically, and so and Montenegro did not want to leave, and so the state union of Montenegro and Serbia would be established. In Serbian language, it would be Države zajednica Srbije I Crna Gora, which that means the state union of Serbia and Montenegro. And so that would last from from the 1990s or 1990s until its final dissolvement in 2008. So that was approximately 14 years ago. That was when the Yugoslavia as a confederation, not as a communist federation, had dissolved in 2008. That was also the same year when Kosovo had declared the independence from Serbia, because Kosovo did not want to be a part of Serbia anymore, and they decided to declare their own independence. And so anyway, United States was having peacekeeping forces, and Bosnia. So like UN forces would be there, United Nation forces would be there, German forces would be there, and French forces would be there. All, like, everybody around the globe would be in Bosnia, protecting it from the forces that were attacking the villages and other minorities of the ex-Yugoslavia. So, and so at that moment, there was also war in Croatia. There was the massacre at Vukovar, and there was also a famous Serbian gangster named Arkan. Arkan was a very brutal person because he was very violent, and he was also a bank robber before the wars broke out in ex-Yugoslavia. And so Archon was after each robbery, and when he was in Western Europe, he would leave a rose in a bank heist or robbery, and he was called the gentleman thief, basically. And so he was kind of like Tito's little hitman, basically, because he was eliminating all Yugoslavia's enemies. And so Archon had also owned many football stadiums, and he had his own political party. Same way, like with Vojislav Šešelj, but Šešelj was a war criminal, and he was also the prime minister of Serbia during the era of Milosevic, I recall. And it's also very interesting of mentioning because the current president of Serbia right now, Aleksandar Vučić, was the Minister of Information in the Milosevic cabinet, and he's the current president of Serbia today. And so, and then at the time, Russia was supporting Yugoslavia or Serbia because they were both Slavic nations. They had the same ideology in the same way, like Russia had supported Serbia in World War One because they were enemies against the Austro-Hungarian Empire. And so the wars in Yugoslavia were the most deadly wars in European history since the time of World War II, because a lot of people were being killed. Millions of people were being killed in Kosovo, Bosnia, and Croatia. And so, and then a huge massacre started to take place in Bosnia. There was one massacre known as Srebrenica that was very brutal because around 8,300 Bosnian Muslim men and children were killed in that area, and it was a bloodbath in Srebrenica, and that was also known as the Bosnian Genocide. And so, and then the United States would be bombing Bosnia against Serbian targets, and then ultimately Bosnian War would end in December 1995 with this signing of peace treaty in Daytona, Ohio. And the participants in that peace treaty was Bill Clinton, who was the president of the United States, Slobodan Milosevic, who was the president of Serbia, and then there would be Frank Tuđman, who was the president of Croatia, and then there was Alija Izetbegović, who was the president of Bosnia. And so that ultimately brought an end to the wars in Bosnia. And then another tension would break out in Kosovo, and it was also a very violent one because there was Albanians were kidnapping Serbs, and they would be like killing them and cutting their stomachs open and selling their organs. It was all that brutal stuff they would be doing to Serbs. But at the moment, and then the United States NATO was bombing Yugoslavia, and then they were bombing them over maybe thousands of Serbs were being killed in that UN bombing by Bill Clinton. And some Serbs do not like Bill Clinton because of the bombings of Yugoslavia in 1999. And so and then there will be protests against Milosevic because he started the wars in Kosovo and Bosnia, and he was found guilty. Or no, he was convicted of war crimes, but his trial had never been finished because in 2006 he would die of a heart attack in his prison cell in The Hague, where other war criminals of the Yugoslav civil wars would be held. And so Archon, at the time, he would soon be killed by a Russian hitman or by Milosevic. There's actually there's two versions of how Archon was killed. There was one statement saying that he was killed by a Russian hitman, or he was killed by Milosevic himself, because he was afraid that Arkan may gain too much power, and so that's why they decided to get rid of him. And he died on January 15th, 2000. So this was 2 years before I was born. And so at the time, in that same year, Milosevic would be removed from power because of the corruption he caused, and he would be overthrown from power, and he would be replaced by Zoran Djindjic, who was willing to get rid of corruption and get rid of all gangsters in Serbia. And so Zoran Djindjic would not rule Serbia for a long time as president, because he would be ultimately assassinated in 2003 by another Serbian gangster. But at the time, it was not Arkan, because Arkan was already dead at the time. And Arkan also had his own military organization that was called Arkanovi Tigrovi, Arkan's Tigers. And in Serbian, it would be Arkanovi Tigrovi. So that was basically his organization, military organization, and in Yugoslavia that took part in numerous atrocities. And so so that was like, and then Yugoslavia would officially come down as a confederation, or the state union of Yugoslavia, or Serbia and Montenegro had officially came down in 2008. And so that's how the former Yugoslav republics that's how Yugoslavia had dissolved. And so Tito, from my perspective, Tito's principle of brotherhood and unity, bratstvo I jedinstvo in Serbian language, had officially did not work out, and that's how all tensions had broke out between all ethnic minorities of former Yugoslavia, or what was Yugoslavia then. And so it was also I also had a few people that I known, or I didn't meet personally yet, that had saw Arkan and other major political figures and war criminals in Serbia at the time of the civil wars in ex-Yugoslavia. And so I have the question of people asking me like, oh, why are you interested in this part of the world? Why are you interested in Serbia? Since I don't have anyone from there, and I'm not Serbian, and I don't have any family from the Balkan Peninsula. So I'll answer. So reasons why I'm interested in that part of the world is because their music is very nice, and their culture, Serbian culture, is very nice, and I like studying their languages, and I like eating their food and watching their movies. And so that's the answer to the questions that many people have been asking me. Why am I interested in the Balkans and Serbia? And so, so I think the fall of Yugoslavia and Soviet Union was much different, because basically Soviet Union did not collapse the way as Yugoslavia had, because Soviet Union dissolved because of political reasons, because the economy was not doing that well, and communism was starting to come down, and Gorbachev's reforms were working, perestroika and glasnost, and soon Gorbachev would resign his post on December 26, 1991, and that officially brought an end to Soviet Union. And then all the Soviet nations, like former Soviet republics like Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Armenia, Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania, Estonia, Latvia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and all those, and Turkmenistan, and all those 15 former republics of Soviet Union had dissolved peacefully. However, for some nations like Azerbaijan and Armenia, they were fighting over each other because of Karabakh. That was that was basically when before Soviet Union became a country, Lenin had given Karabakh to Azerbaijan, and then that sparked a huge tension between Armenia and Azerbaijan. Basically, Armenia was they basically was fighting over that territory because the Karabakh belonged to Armenia. That's kind of the same scenario where like Serbia was fighting over Kosovo from Albania because they were saying Kosovo belongs to Serbia, while Albania was saying Kosovo belonged to Albania. And so also during the Yeltsin time, when it was Boris Yeltsin, there were some wars going on in some Russian republics, like in Chechnya. There were two Chechen wars. One was from 1994 to 1996, and that was fighting against the Chechen forces, because Chechen forces in that region wanted their independence from Russia, because Chechnya had declared their independence from Soviet Union, but they wanted to be their own republic. They did not want to be with Russia. And so the second war was from 1999 until 2009. So that war lasted for 10 years. And so, yeah, Soviet Union and Yugoslavia had collapsed very differently as they had in the past. So, yeah. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video or first live stream of why Yugoslavia came down. It's the reasons why Yugoslavia came down and the life after Yugoslavia came down, and the similarity and the differences between why Soviet Union and Yugoslavia collapsed very differently as they had. So, hvala na gledaju, vidimo se sljedeći put, i doviđenja se sada.